Hey guys, it's time for another talk, but first let me say how really grateful I am for the amazing reception you gave to me returning to these monologues. Your comments were an embarrassment of riches. Thank you for that. And special thanks to those who showed up to support me on my Patreon and Subscribestar pages. Parting with a few of your hard-earned bucks for something I do for free is the best affirmation ever. Oh, and one more thing. In the description area, you'll not only find links to my Patreon and Subscribestar, there's also a link to my channel on Gab TV. I've already posted all the video talks that I consider important there. If you like following my work, I suggest subbing to be there as well. We all know the day will come that YouTube purges red pill content from the platform completely. When they come from my channel here, Gab TV is where I'll be. And now it's time for today's talk, which I must start with an obligatory disclaimer. When I refer to women here or in any of my talks, I'm not pretending to talk about every woman on the planet. So for the not all police who occasionally stumble upon my work and suddenly want to issue citations, just put your ticket books up. I fully acknowledge that not all women are like that. Indeed, I acknowledge that not all women are like most anything you can think of, nor are men. That's a fact of life with which I live very comfortably. That said, when I say women here or in any of my talks, I am talking about nearly all the women I've had experience with over 64 years of living. Oh, and nearly all the women that nearly all the men I've known in 64 years of living tell me they've experienced. And, oh yeah, nearly all the women the thousands of men I've worked with over a span of decades have told me they've experienced. But for sure, that's not all women. See how woke I am? Now, down to today's business, defeating relational aggression in women. For this, we better start with a definition. Relational aggression, or RA for the sake of brevity, is a type of aggression in which harm is caused by damaging someone's relationships or social status. That's the definition Google will give you, but of course, what you won't see mentioned, aside from RA being a perfect definition of the Me Too movement, is that it is primarily a woman's aggression of choice. Linked below. When women abuse the significant people in their lives, this is most often how they do it. And thanks to the way we socialize women, it's a form of abuse that society largely regards as normal behavior. Even with that simple definition in mind, it's actually a somewhat complicated subject to cover. Relational aggression, unlike physical aggression, doesn't just present itself in sudden, unambiguous terms like an outburst of physical violence. It's subtle but permeates the entire relationship. It appears in the midst of everyday life and can impact destructively at most any moment. Usually, it's enabled by men who consider it normal, acceptable behavior from women. They've been conditioned to think that these aren't terminal flaws in women's character, but rather just minor peccadillos that they must tolerate if they don't want to go through life alone. This normalization of female abusiveness is costly to men. I've seen thousands of them pay the price for it. If you'd like some more in-depth perspective on spotting RA early on, I've linked you in the description area to a 38-minute discussion I had with Tom Golden on the subject. You may find that useful in association with this talk. Now, let's examine just one way that RA comes into play between men and women. If you're male, I doubt you'll have any trouble relating to this. We start with a quote from Chris Rock. I'm paraphrasing here, but in one of his routines, he said something to the effect that nothing bothers a woman more than to see her man with nothing to do. Women are instantly aggravated by the sight of a man too relaxed and too comfortable. Rock's stinging delivery of that sentiment was very funny for the same reason that makes all good comedy. Because it's true. Women don't like seeing a man, their man, any man, being idle. And of course, the reason for that is simple. In the blue pill romantic narrative, which is the human narrative, the role for men in the lives of women is as a protection and provision machine. Your mandate as a man is to seek to produce as many resources as possible, regardless of the impact on your quality of life or even the duration of your life, and to lay all those resources at a woman's feet. From the depths of our history to our own modern realities, we know that you, dear listener, in the default view of women, are a kind of utility, and one that is supposed to run nonstop. No breaks, no downtime. Even your so-called time off and so-called vacations are more about others, her, than you. When the man machine quits running or breaks or just squeaks too loud, most women are not long for the exit. When the man machine quits running, it very precisely marks the spot where the sexual connection between pair bonding men and women ends. Call that cynical if you must, you still can't deny that it's true. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, hey, Paul, it's a new day. Women are making more money than ever, and many are even finding their purse on dates these days. Well, okay. But first, I need to force back an almost overwhelming urge to scream not all women at the top of my lungs. But instead, I will refer you to a 2015 study I found, linked below. It confirms that, yes, more women are in some measure paying more for relationship life to begin with. From the study's abstract, it claims that 74% of men and 83% of women report that both members of the couple contribute to dating expenses after dating for 6 months. But nowhere near that word contribute do we find the word equally, nor could we. Most men, 84%, and women, 58%, reported that men still pay more expenses. I'll let you work out the huge disparity in perception between women and men on that one for yourself. But consider, with the unqualified use of the term contribute, every woman you've ever known who, after several lavish dates paid for by men, actually reached into her purse and paid for a round of Starbucks because she too wants to, do her part. The study goes on to say that many women, 39%, wished men would reject their offers to pay, and that 44% of women were bothered when men expected to help women pay. That's 2015, folks, not 1983. The more things change, the more they stay the same. And I'm not blaming women for any of this. The superficial and ultimately meaningless feminist blather about empowering females aside, our society still conditions women to see men as machines, designed and built to serve the lives of women. Indeed, the exploitation of men is exactly what feminists count on, or they wouldn't even exist. Our entire economy, our governance, and even our families are predicated on this unabashedly gynocentric model. Do we really expect women as a class to reject this level of conditioning for the sake of decency and fairness that they've never been held to in their lives? And of course, men largely see themselves in the same way. Men so thoroughly dedicate themselves to this way of existing that they feel shame for taking money from a woman under any circumstances. 76% of them, according to that study. Get that. Most men feel ashamed of asking a woman to simply carry some of her own weight. That shame is the very thing that relationally aggressive women exploit to get their way. Chris Rock was 100% correct. As a rule, women are annoyed by their men having leisure time. And so how do women keep the pressure up to keep the machine running and servicing her needs? Simple. It's RA, relational aggression. And the number one asset that women have in their RA arsenal is masculine shame. The psychological abuse of nagging or belittling a blue pill man for not being productive produces shame in him because internally he believes that it degrades his social standing as a man. Men know exactly how society measures them up. We know about this from our understanding of precarious manhood. That understanding informs us that manhood, in contrast to womanhood, is seen as a precarious state requiring continual social proof and validation. Study linked below. Shame is the abusive woman's backhand. When she berates a man for not being productive, she is just manipulating him to serve her selfish ends or to get him to do things she won't bother to do for herself. And with men's manhood being a matter of social standing, we then understand that she isn't just nagging. She's being relationally aggressive. It's important for men to see her relational aggression in the exact same way society would tell her to view his physical aggression. Now, we don't need shelters or anything of the sort, but we do need men to understand that the only thing to do with a woman who uses shame to control and abuse is to wheel her to the curb with the rest of your garbage. That's where that kind of woman belongs. Even if no one else hears or sees the abuse, the attacks register and take their psychological toll for as long as you're willing to be a victim. In many cases, however, you won't be the only one involved. Many women will recruit friends, relatives, and even their own children to act as audience members and cheerleaders for her attacks. This behavior is the predictive precursor to the full-blown parental alienation and false accusations that will come to pass when divorce or breakup occurs. Parental alienation and false allegations are purely acts of relational aggression, designed to destroy your relationships right along with your social standing. They are driven by the same defect of character that leads her to berate you for spending some time on the sofa. These kinds of women, and they are legion, aren't just annoyed by a man's inactivity. Many of them are annoyed by men engaging in activities that are solely for the benefit or enjoyment of the man. I can't even remember how many men I've known who reported that hobbies, interests, and even close friendships had disappeared from their lives because they were met with relational aggression by a woman. Not even the work you do as a provider is immune. I doubt if there is anyone in the Western world who is not familiar with the theme of onerous financial demands being placed on men who are then vilified by their dependent women because their work takes them away from home. One of the very first essays I wrote on men's issues, A Prayer for Joe Bob, linked below, addressed this, even suggesting a connection between men coping with relational aggression and suicide. What I tried to get at in that piece, even if I didn't know it at the time, was that what we call romantic love for men is frequently predicated on surrendering to the subtle tyranny of a woman's abusive control. And of course, maintaining that abusive control depends on men not talking about it or even recognizing it. And that's too bad for men who comply, because if you can't have your own interests outside your relationship, your own friends, your own identity, you can't be a whole person. And that's the point. Whole human beings don't tolerate abuse. So the targets of relational aggression must be made less than whole. Everything about them, from their interests and friendships to their very view of themselves, must be chipped away at till they are weak and isolated enough to fully control. Men's challenge, therefore, is laid bare for consideration, because this area, where men either hold on to their interests and individuality or surrender them, is the mother of all crossroads. It is quite literally where the rubber meets the road, where men and mice part ways. Did I say where men and mice part ways? Well, in a healthier red pill world, this would be where a lot of men and women part ways. I normally shy away from any attempts to define manhood for anyone but myself. I think that's a dangerous business. But if I were to start qualifying what I thought a real man was, I think I'd say that a real man would be able to look any relationally aggressive woman directly in the eye and say the following: I've got friendships and other interests outside this relationship that I will be maintaining for as long as I care to. And if you ever try in any way to force me to choose between any of them or you, then I will choose them every time. And of course he has to mean it. For anyone who thinks that sounds cold, you're right. And it should be. RA is nothing but relationship poison. I don't care what her intentions were, or rather what she says her intentions were. RA is a dark sickness that our society instills in women, one that destroys the lives of men who allow it. It is a form of emotional terrorism with which you are foolish to receive with anything but savage rejection. Hear this. The woman who will shame you for kicking back on the couch or for making time for your friends is the same woman who will say you sexually molested your children or that you were violent with her when divorce papers are served. Bank on it. Many men also make the mistake of engaging in a protracted relationship battle, dodging the bullets, trying to game their way around her constant emotional onslaughts, attempting to hang on to any fragment of their lives they enjoyed before the relationship started. Bad move, guys. Many women see this, and quite accurately, as a battle that they will win. She wins by even getting you to fight about it in the first place. This is one game where the only winning move is to totally upend the board. This isn't supposed to be a battle for you to engage. It's an edict for you to issue. If your individuality, your wholeness as a person, is up for debate with anyone, then you've already lost. This is your gatekeeping moment, and if you establish that she can't or won't engage in a healthy way, and many women can't or won't, just toss a match onto the connection you have with her and walk away. Wish her well, endure your grief, then carry on. It's the only sane thing to do. It's simple for most men, but not easy. I mean, all you need do is overcome 6 million years of hominid evolution, 1,000 years of romantic chivalric tradition, every prevailing socio-political canon on the sexes in existence, and 3 million pink-haired, morbidly obese, screaming windbags in pussy hats. I mean, how hard could that be? More seriously, though, the lesson here is clear. RA is the weed in your garden that must be pulled out by the roots, or it will invariably take over. For many men who decided to do the work and keep their garden clear, you will almost certainly have to do some teaching. I doubt if many women, despite their wanton practice of it, even know what relational aggression is. They no more understand their own behavior than they understand quantum physics. They don't need condemnation, though, as much as they need teachers. Men who are willing to sit them down and educate them with the expectation that they must learn and the willingness to do what needs to be done if they can't or won't. And if you'll allow me to beat this dead horse just a little longer, this stuff is important. This isn't about outsmarting anyone or excelling at game or frame or any other shit like that. It's about preserving your dignity. And, whether she knows it or not, her dignity too. After all, practicing RA in relationships has never done her any favors either. More than likely, it has brought her misery and failure. She just doesn't know that she was the cause of it. To me, this is where red pill men come to the rescue, if you will. The only kind of white knighting that we should ever consider doing. If we want to, we can be here to teach teachable women what no one else in their lives ever has. How to be a worthy, respectable partner in a relationship. That starts with zero aggression tolerated, relational or otherwise. And guys, that is it for this talk. Thank you once again for taking the time to listen, and as always, I hope you've enjoyed. Even if you haven't, and we'll see you next time.